17 of the laws of 2021 until January 15th, 2022, all of the board's meetings are expected to be held remotely via video conference. So we ask the public to continually check the town's website for updates and new information. As a reminder, applicants, agents, and members of the public who speak at this meeting should state their name and address for the record. The link to participate in this meeting via Zoom can be found on the town's website at the town clerk's meeting portal. If you do not wish to speak at the meeting, but you would like to submit comments for the public record, the link to submit comments can also be found on the town's website. Please join together for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
of
of the United States of America
and
to the republic
for which
for which it
stands
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice.
and justice for all.
for all.
What is your pleasure on the minutes of November 3rd, 2021?
Motion to accept as presented.
Second,
All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
aye.
Tom Florio,
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
Tom McIntyre.
Aye.
Public hearings, Michael Nardi. Is there someone in attendance for this one?
Yeah, it should be Charles Voorhees.
Michael Nardi wants to be let in.
And Joe Burke, I think, wants to be let in, or Mr. J. Burke. Whichever J. Burke that is.
There's only one Jay Burke.
Oh, I know several people whose first initial is J, last
Yeah, I
name
know.
Burke. I don't know which one it is.
They're coming
Joe
in.
Burke. Okay, it's our James Burke.
Evening.
Somebody's trying to dial in. Okay, they're on mute, just so you know. Michael, you have Michael's off mute.
So Charles, is Michael unable to come in?
Michael's on.
Michael should be in. Let's see.
Michael, you just have to hit your
You have to
camera
hit-
and
see, let me see
you're
if I
you're
can
muted again, Michael, and then you should have a camera in the lower
Start your
left hand.
video.
Yeah,
Unmute.
you're on mute again. There you go. You're off mute. Say something.
Start your video.
Who's ever dialed in is also on mute.
Yeah, the person that dialed in, you have to hit *6 to be heard. Chick Voorhees is coming in. If the person that's dialed in wants to speak, you have to hit *6 on your phone. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, so
Can't get
Uh,
Michael Nardi going. I don't know what the problem is, but. Keeps turning this.
welcome, Chick. Are you going to present this application?
Yes, hi. I'm so sorry for a little bit of complications getting in. I am ready to go if you are.
We're ready. How about Michael? Does he want to participate?
I believe he does. I see his name there.
He's unmuted.
He says he has no video. He's chatting.
Okay. We can't hear him though.
I don't know if Charles can help him out.
I can't. His microphone is unmuted, but we don't hear it. So he either has to turn his volume up. I have no control over his computer.
If
He can call in though. Or you can put your phone on speaker and call him.
I've done that before, Charles.
Yeah.
It's never that easy.
Yeah.
All right, he's calling me again. So sorry. Hang on one second.
it's unfortunate.
Okay, all right.
See everybody, I can hear everybody.
All right, so Charles, just as you said, I have Mike on speakerphone right now. I know the connections aren't great, but he will probably want to make some remarks.
That's fine. We can hear him through the speakerphone.
Okay,
Okay,
Just put it close to your computer.
okay, good. So, would you like me to?
Would you
present, or what?
yes, would you present the application, please?
Yes, I will. I'm just going to bring up some materials that will help. Is that visible?
Yeah,
Yes.
Good, okay. So good evening. We're here at the November 17th Conservation Board meeting, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Chick Voorhees of Nelson Pope Voorhees. My office is at 70 Maxis Road in Melville. I'm a certified environmental professional and a certified planner. I have 43 years of environmental planning experience on Long Island. And I've processed many wetlands applications in towns and villages on Long Island. Through this presentation, I'm going to address the existing conditions of the site and area, the application itself, the preliminary advisory report, and Chapter 325 as it relates to the criteria for permit review, agency jurisdiction, other permits that we've identified from the area, and then just sum up with a few findings. As far as existing conditions, this is the subject property. It's on the west side of Shore Road. The address is 111. The tax map is here. It's zoned R10, and it's 10,500 square feet in size. These are basically the existing conditions on the property. You can see that there are extensive improvements and residential use of the site. It's my understanding the site has been developed and the house has existed since approximately the 1940s. So we have the existing house. There have been some additions which have been legalized through penalty. There's the existing garage and deck and the improvements attached to the house. There are 2 driveway cuts to Shore Road. There are pea gravel driveways across the site, as you can see. The decks and the pergola, which is in the front, the wood pergola. There are existing docks in the waterway. And as you can see, the property is fully improved and used for residential use. This just zooms out the aerial a little bit. This is from Southampton Town GIS. Shows the property, but it shows some of the properties in the area. This is called North Sea Creek. There are existing homes on relatively small lots. Many of the properties are bulkheaded and many of the properties are not bulkheaded. You can see recreational docks along the canal, along the creek, and there's a marina to the south. This is the shoreline immediately north of the property. So the view is at the north property line, looking north, and it's the view of the neighboring property immediately north. That neighbor has a dock and float that's currently existing. They have a bulkhead, as you can see, that ties to the ramp that goes down to the dock, the float. You can see extensive Spartina alterniflora. The shoreline shows healthy wetlands, and this is similar to what we would look to achieve and look to retain on the subject site. And also you can see that the ground surface is below the level of the bulkhead, which is clearly visible. This is that same property, just looking at it from my client's dock, showing again the extensive wetland vegetation, bog intact, the recreational boat use by the neighbor to the north, and healthy wetlands. This is pretty much the same. It just has a little better view of the existing boat dock that is being used by the neighbor to the north. This image is from the subject property looking south. And this shows an existing bulkhead. Also Spartina alterniflora right up to the bulkhead. Also a fixed dock, a small ramp, and floats that are used for recreational access. The shoreline is healthy in terms of the stand of tidal marsh, and also the ground surface is below the level of the bulkhead. This is just another view. It zooms out a little. It's from Mr. Nardi's dock itself, and you can see the bulkhead. You can see the frontage of this subject property, and you can see the recreational pier immediately to the south. Just to characterize the application, this black and white dashed line is the location of a proposed vertical tongue and groove vinyl wall. The wall would be above spring high water, and wetlands. As you can see, the green line is the wetland delineation. Vinyl sheeting would have no tiebacks. We believe it is not necessary if proper penetration, tongue and groove sheeting is used. It's supported by wales and some type of cap. The proposal would be for a 100-foot connection between the existing bulkhead to the north to the existing bulkhead to the south. It would retain the existing intertidal wetland vegetation. And as I said before, structures have been addressed through the payment of a penalty through the permit process so far. This is the cross-section that's included with the application. It shows the tidal wetlands vegetation to remain. It shows the wall approximately 12.8 feet from the house. We are proposing approximately 15 cubic yards of fill material, clean material to be brought in. And the need for the project is to protect the property similar to both of the neighboring properties. The idea is to raise the elevation near the home and retain the existing healthy marsh. I'd just like to go through some of the items in the preliminary advisory report dated February 8th, 2021. one thing that I noted was, just right on page 1, the application as characterized in the report indicates it's to destroy the existing natural vegetated tidal wetlands and shoreline. And as you can see from the project, the images from the neighboring properties, all work is to be above the spring and high water and the wetlands. The advisory report also notes that any further wetland losses may imperil the alewife reclamation plan and health and viability of estuarine watercourse and resources. That's on page 2. And I don't really see a scientific basis for that. Certainly, it's very important to protect all wetlands. In this case, the shoreline will remain as a vegetated marsh, and I don't see these impacts occurring. If anything, it's a little bit overstated. The report also acknowledges the vulnerability of the property to flooding. This is the reason for the application. My client will speak to that, but he does experience flooding and notes that his neighbors do not have the same conditions. And he'll speak a little bit more about the condition of the house and some of the compromises he's had to make because of this situation. The next part of the report is on page 3, where it states that the wetlands would be destroyed and or adversely impacted. And we've designed this application specifically to protect the existing wetlands. The advisory report then goes into some of the conformance criteria in chapter 325-9. The first is the 75-foot buffer, which is required. However, it's impractical and infeasible. There's been an existing building on this site. It's about 13 feet from the wetlands. It's existed on the site since the 1940s. And it's just really not possible to achieve this level of a buffer. There are other portions where you can't meet these standards that speak to the minimum and practicable and things like that I'll talk about briefly. But for the purpose of this, it is really not feasible. But we do plan to amend the application to propose a buffer. In terms of wetland impact, the second criteria that's in the advisory report, the finding that impact will undoubtedly occur, in my opinion, is speculative based on the reasons that I've mentioned. It also does mention noise and visual construction impacts. That's normal in residential areas. These impacts are temporary and they are controllable. On the points that continue within the advisory report, there's one phrase, and I just omitted a few words to make it fit, but despite the applicant's claim that the bulkhead will be built landward of the wetlands, is on page 3. And again, I just felt that didn't adequately characterize what's being proposed. The wall shown on the plan is landward of the wetlands. Other properties to the north and south have bulkheads and healthy tidal marsh. Water filtration and cleansing will still continue. The marsh will continue to provide shoreline stabilization. The advisory report does mention that this area is close to shellfishing. Well, it is a creek area. It's subject to runoff. It has fairly constricted water flow. There's also sanitary systems surrounding it. So I would just say that other factors contribute to shellfish closure in this area. And I will say that the wall, in my opinion, will reduce runoff. As I noted on the other neighboring properties, the walls are higher than the land. And also we will be adding a buffer that I'll explain a little bit more. And we also plan to agree to no fertilization whatsoever on the property. And my client can speak to his intent to honor that, and we can provide whatever restrictions are appropriate. The advisory report also talks about mitigation, which is one of the criteria that's on page 3. We do recognize this and wish to amend the application. The native buffer that is proposed to be added will be 1,033 square feet in size. The overall area of lawn that will not be fertilized is 2,154 square feet. We also plan to add dry wells for roof runoff, which don't currently exist. I did note that in terms of construction and the advisory report, we do want to make sure there's no impact to the wetlands. And so we'll add a silt fence at the limit of construction. And it's more of a trustees matter, but there are excessive and extensive floats in the waterway. We will remove 2 of those floats as part of this project. On page 4, the advisory report references a pool. And I've done this before as well. It's obvious it was a typo left over from another report. So, no offense taken, but I just want to clarify for the record that there is no pool proposed with this application. The next point had to do with that the project is not necessary to enjoy or profit from residential use of the site. And that's on page 4 of the report. And as I've indicated, both neighbors have bulkheads. The Nardi property is unfairly restricted, in my opinion, and the flooding impedes the use and enjoyment of the property. In terms of profit or economics, the value of the property would be enhanced with a wall. But, I'm just looking to kind of address what I saw in the advisory report, and I feel that this is a more accurate characterization of these factors. On page 4 of the report, it does talk about alternatives, and I can tell you, obviously, we've adjourned the hearing a number of times. We have looked at alternatives in this time period. We've looked at FOIL requests. We've looked to improve the project. So my apologies for adjourning. But I do want to tell you that my client does have a cost to raise the house, which would be $94,000 in that range. It's about 1/6 of the purchase price of the home. The proposed project would be about half this cost. So just for comparison, we have looked at those. And then, of course, from a seeker standpoint, you look at the no action alternative, but the no action would not protect the house or the property. And in our opinion, there are no other alternatives for shoreline protection that would protect the wetlands as well as the house. So just in terms of a summary of the points of 325-9, under 325-9B2, it does refer to this and references specifically the maximum practicable buffer zone. We believe we've done that, and you'll see the illustration that shows that that is in fact true. Under 325-9B3, the project incorporates all reasonable, and I underlined reasonable mitigation measures. And I'll just summarize them at the end, but you have a sense of what they are. Under 325-9B4, the project will protect the wetlands and not diminish its size or quality. But both that as well as looking for the minimum possible alteration and no practical alternative. And I believe I've addressed these, but this is the minimum alteration, and we have not identified a practical alternative. And that also speaks to 325-9D, 1, 2, and 3. Just on these points, if a project is less than the recommended setbacks, that's where we get into this language about the buffer zone. And we believe we have the minimum practicable buffer added, which is 1,033 square feet, and no lawn fertilization. Also, there can be no wetlands impairment. In this case, the wetlands will remain intact for habitat, and buffer is being added. Under 325-9D4C, it speaks to erosion, sedimentation, and runoff control. And in this case, we do not expect any impact. We will add roof dry wells and the silt fence, as I indicated. And in terms of mitigation, the quick list is that there will be a proposed buffer. There's no lawn fertilization. We will add dry wells for roof runoff, and we will add a silt fence. So in these cases, we believe we do conform with 325-9. I do want to just talk a little bit about the coastal situation here. It was noted in the advisory report, as well as our documents, that this is not an area on a bay or an open body of water that has a lot of fetch. The tide rises and falls, and the canal is quite narrow. So we don't really see the type of erosional forces that you would see in an open bay area. So I would not expect the scouring that you would see in those areas. And certainly we discourage bulkheads in areas that are may be subject to those influences. So I think that's an important point just in terms of the ecology and the environment of this area. This is the proposed buffer mitigation and dock removal plan. This summarizes the items that I've discussed. It's literally hot off the press. This has not been submitted. I would plan to submit all of this, including the PowerPoint presentation for the record. We've been working on this diligently, looking to get it prepared, at least for a graphic image. And it shows the natural buffer, which is this crosshatched area. I discussed this extensively with my client. He is very intent to retain the natural character of the property as much as possible. I'm sure you've all been to the site. You know the healthy vegetated wetlands along the shoreline. You've noticed the groundsel bush, the bacchus fringing that. We're looking to retain that, and we also can add vegetation that would complement that. And that's been required on other permits on adjacent properties through the Conservation Board. So you can also see that we're coming very close to the house. There is access to the existing dock system. We're looking to retain a 4-foot wide grassy path. It would be able to come off the driveway, and there's a wood deck with steps that go down to the driveway. So there's still access. But my client said there's really no need or reason to get to the back of the house, and we would just leave a several foot area that would just be maintained, probably mowed, in order to just get around the house. And the same goes for the garage. You can see that there is a bin on the back of the garage. We came a few feet off of that. And so this entire area, which totals 1,033 square feet, is proposed as a natural buffer. And so that's partly in fulfillment of the mitigation. In addition, the lighter green is the 2,154 square feet of non-fertilized lawn. My client has no need to fertilize. He can shift this over to more native grasses that don't require fertilization if needed, but they are willing to restrict, covenant, whatever method would be appropriate to eliminate all fertilization on the property. And certainly that's one of the concerns environmentally. It was mentioned in the advisory report, and we feel that that is a worthwhile mitigation measure. We've located 2 potential roof drains. These would have to be aligned with the gutters and leaders to ensure that water from the roof gets into those. But currently water just goes on the surface of the ground. We would look to control that. You can see the note, install silt fence at the limit of construction. That dot should actually be on the seaward side, but a silt fence would be placed completely along the limit of construction to ensure that no impact to the wetlands would occur. And this note indicates 2 floats to be removed. So these are the floats that would not be present should this be granted and we move forward. Just in terms of jurisdiction, a DEC permit has been issued. This is the number, you have it in the file. We also have a no permit necessary from Army Corps of Engineers from January of 2020. This was a little bit of a ping pong ball because we first applied to the trustees and they determined it was not part of their jurisdiction. But the Conservation Board had advised us, or staff for the Conservation Board had advised us to go to the trustees. So it's a little bit of back and forth to figure that out. So just in summary, we did make initial application to the trustees. They determined there was no jurisdiction on their part. The Conservation Board had advised us to do so on June 18th, 2020. The applicant advised the Conservation Board staff that the trustees issued the non-jurisdiction, and the application continued processing through the Conservation Board based on the dates above, which is the submission date and the revised submission date from September 16th that has the current plan. And there was one other October correspondence that transmitted the penalty payment. So that's the full history. Now, it is curious to me, and I know that Mr. Shea is here, but it seems, and I've had this discussion with Marty, that other bulkheads below mean high water are permitted by the trustees and not the Conservation Board. So in this case, Conservation Board first tried to have this application be processed by the trustees. And I suppose, and actually in talking about some of the bulkheads along the creek, Mr. Shea told me that they weren't permitted by the Conservation Board, they were permitted by the trustees. So it seems to me as though this could have resulted in a bulkhead permitted by the trustees if we had proposed it in trustee jurisdiction area. But the trustees found no jurisdiction because we moved the bulkhead back. So in this case, we pulled it back, it's above spring and high water, and it protects the wetlands. And, rather than putting it in the waterway, this is obviously superior from an environmental standpoint. We also researched other properties. So 121 that I mentioned before, and you saw photographs of, is immediately north of the site. Based on aerial photographs, and I don't have the permit history on this, but based on aerial photographs, this bulkhead was installed between 2013 and 2017. As you can see, there's the healthy intertidal marsh, and the Conservation Board did issue a permit for that property. It included a second story and two-story additions with some removal of other improvements that were on the property. And the notes in the file indicate that a 10 to 20 foot buffer was added. So that's just the information that we could find on that particular site. The property to the south, we did not find that there was any permit issued by the Conservation Board based on a FOIL request. Based on aerial photograph review, it appears as though the bulkhead was installed between 2004 and 2007. And again, you saw the images that there's a healthy intertidal marsh seaward of the bulkhead. So our findings based on the information, there's 9 points, and that'll conclude my remarks. But basically, the project is a simple wall intended to elevate and retain soil on the property. The wall will be located above spring and high water. The shorefront wetland vegetation will remain on the site. There's empirical evidence in the form of the two neighboring properties that supports that the wetlands can remain intact and not be impacted. We believe that the advisory report overstates some of the potential impacts. It includes some speculative comments and also some inaccuracies. We believe the project meets the intent of Chapter 325-9 and the criteria therein. As I noted, the DEC has issued a permit. And we did have this back and forth with the trustees versus the Conservation Board, but this project protects the wetlands obviously better than if it were in trustee jurisdiction. The project is consistent with other bulkheads installed post 2004 in the case of the one to the south, and post 2013 as in the case of the one to the north. And we believe it's also superior because it's stepped back from those bulkheads, will allow a greater area of natural intertidal wetland, and that differs from those neighboring properties. We're just tying into their returns, but we've stepped the bulkhead back. And finally, the project will be modified or is modified through my request this evening to include a 1,033 square foot natural buffer, 2,154 square feet of non-fertilized grass, the addition of dry wells for roof runoff, the addition of silt fence at the limit of construction, the addition of, I said that twice, and the removal of 2 floats. So we believe, based on the items 1 through 9, that objective review would support the issuance of the requested permit. My follow-up would be to submit this presentation. I'll probably make a few minor corrections for those numbers and the repeated phrase. Submit the buffer plan, memorialize no fertilization restriction, submit the plan that indicates the dry wells and the silt fence and the float removal. And that concludes my remarks, and I really thank you for your attention.
Chick, I have a couple of questions. Can you hear me, Chick?
Yes, I don't
Okay.
see you speaking.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can bounce out
Yeah.
of this and increase
Uh,
the volume a little.
Would you put
I have.
would you put your chart back up on the screen that you showed before, that shows an overhead picture of the property?
Certainly. Is that this one or one of the earlier?
That one will work.
Okay,
If the earlier one is bigger, that works even better.
yeah, let me go to that. It's a pretty short presentation, so I'll get. This is probably the one that would show the property in total.
Okay. The other one is better because I'm looking for the lines and the location of where you want to put things.
Sure.
That works well.
Right here.
Yes, let's look at that
Missing
one.
here is the driveway connection to the street. Everything else is shown on this.
Okay. So you're proposing that the black and white line is the bulkhead that you want to install?
That is correct. This is where it ties into the neighbor's return on the south. This is where it ties into the neighbor's return on the north.
And you're proposing a buffer that looks approximately like that green hash part?
Yes, it's a variable buffer, obviously, because the site has existing improvements. The hatched green is the buffer, proposed buffer.
So would you talk a little bit about the flooding that you talk about your client has experienced on the property? That is, how often is that experienced? Is it cyclical? Is it occasionally? And where does the water come from that floods?
If we can, I'd like to have Mr. Nardi address that. He lives there, his father has lived there, and he is most familiar with it.
Okay.
Mike, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Can everybody hear me? I'm sorry that for the technical difficulties. The flooding takes place for many reasons. Generally, when there's a heavy rainstorm, if there's high tide tied into a storm or a full moon, things like that. But it's exacerbated by the fact that my neighbors on both sides have bulkheads. So I become, and across the creek, directly across the creek, those properties have bulkheads. So the water has no other place to go except this property. Unfortunately, the house is a pre-existing house close to the water. It's a beautiful property, but there's really nowhere where the water is to go. And I'm not looking to sterilize the waterfront with a bulkhead that's, done down in South Florida, for example. We're looking to have that bulkhead be there to help prevent the surge of water onto the property and further damage to the house.
Okay, Mike, let me interrupt you for a minute. You're giving a nice sales pitch of why you want this application approved. That does not begin to answer my question. I have very simple questions. I want to know somewhat the frequency, once a week, once a month, once a year. Is it regular? Is it irregular? The second is, where does the water come from? Does it come from rain, from the sky, or does it come from the North Sea Creek rising and coming over your property there, or does it come from runoff from other properties?
It comes from the creek, and it comes from the creek anytime it rains. And the amount of water that rises onto the property is dependent upon how severe the rain, the tides, what time it's raining, and, you know, a full moon or not full moon. But every time it rains, there's water that ends up onto that property in varying degrees.
So is that multiple times per year, Mike?
Every time it rains, it could happen. If it rains 15 times a year, it's happening 15 times a year.
Okay.
Okay,
And the degree to which it comes onto the property is either 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, 10 feet. It depends upon how much water is coming in from the creek, how much storm surge is coming in from the creek on any given, storm.
okay.
Summer, it happens in the fall, the winter, with a snowstorm, it doesn't matter the time of the year.
So essentially what you're saying is North Sea Creek experiences a storm surge every time it rains, and that water comes up onto your property. And that's the essence of the problem.
I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, the cause of the flooding. I just know that the property has flooding and it's not coming from my neighbor. I actually have a picture of my neighbor's property where my property is flooded and he, with the bulkhead on the right side of me, has less flooding. So we're essentially, it depends upon the type of storm that's coming through. Hurricane comes through and it's, the storm surge goes up into the driveway, halfway down the stone driveway.
And that is consistent with the floodplain delineation of this area. Just to put a little science to it, it doesn't always rain when there's an east wind or vice versa, but I think what we're hearing and understand just from a climatic standpoint is that, when you do get low pressure systems, often with east winds, often with precipitation, that's going to exacerbate the collection of water in North Sea Creek from the bay, from North Sea. Certainly moon tides, we know just from other areas and being on Long Island, it affects areas throughout Long Island. This property is affected because it is partly within the flood zone. So I think what Mike is saying from a practical standpoint of his experience matches up with what we would expect.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question temporarily, at least for now. And at this point, if there's another board member who'd like to ask a question, this is a good time to, or otherwise, Marty, would you like to address concerns?
Certainly, members of the board, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. I did have an opportunity to return to the property this afternoon, as indicated by the photo documentation. The shoreline is marked by healthy tidal wetlands, saltwater cordgrasses, mussels, young finfish, salt meadow grasses, and mature groundsel shrubs, all of which would be impacted by this application. The applicant had spoken with regards to some of the neighboring and budding properties. My recollection is that there is no history of the board issuing wetland permits for new bulkheads in this area. The applicant was initially advised to go to the Board of Trustees, not in the interest of having the trustees permit a bulkhead, But in order to get a jurisdictional determination from the trustees to ensure that there were no jurisdictional conflicts with regards to permitting between the town and the trustees. So the bulkheads in the area and the large majority of the development in the area is what we would refer to as pre-existing non-conforming under the wetland law. In that you're looking at structures and shoreline modifications that were permitted by various agencies other than the Conservation Board prior to the effective date of Chapter 325, and as such do not conform with the current standards for permit issuance. Upon visiting the property, one of the first responses is that while the property is in a flood zone and is of course subject to periodic flooding, the bulkheading or retaining wall construction is wholly unnecessary and would result in very significant adverse wetland impacts. I should mention that there are two essential parts to this application. The first, as discussed, is the applicant's proposal to build a bulkhead or retaining wall. But the second part is that there are significant accessory improvements that were made at this property without the requisite wetland permits that need to be addressed, rectified, and or legalized as part of the pending application, which you're considering. And some of those improvements include a southwest deck, a northwest residential deck, retaining walls, wood trellis and pergola, a garage deck. Some changes were made to the driveway over the years without requisite wetland permits as well. These are all construction activities that are very close to the wetlands, generally between 12 to 18 feet from the wetlands. As you know, the law today recommends minimum setback of 100 feet for construction. And while there may be an inability for the applicant to meet those requirements, the deck construction was not completed at maximized wetland setbacks and is within very close proximity to the naturally vegetated tidal wetlands. Now, as you know, when there is a need to consider legalization of existing structures, what Chapter 325 directs the board to do is to offset, either require that those improvements be removed or look to offset the wetland impacts of that construction by requiring buffer zones. While this property cannot establish the recommended 75 feet wide naturally vegetated wetland buffer, in these cases, the board looks to maximize the buffers. And those buffers are established at natural grade or as close to natural grade as possible, so they can tie in with the wetlands and tie in ecologically and provide benefits for wetland dependent wildlife, values in terms of filtration of contaminants. So it's key that these buffers be reclaimed and restored at a natural grade rather than and be contiguous with the naturally vegetated wetlands, as opposed to being separated by a retaining wall or bulkhead and be at a higher elevation as a result of the proposed backfill. So while the applicant at this late hour is offering to establish buffers, while these buffers would become native plant landscapes, they wouldn't provide ecological functions and benefits that we typically look for when we establish buffers to offset construction in close proximity to wetlands. The applicant has indicated that there's an ability to construct the bulkhead immediately landward of the naturally vegetated wetlands without impact. First, it's very difficult to work within close proximity of mature shrubs without cutting into the ground, cutting the rootstocks, and damaging the vegetation. It's very hard to construct bulkheads without causing any disturbance seaward at all. And so basically the bulkhead is being proposed immediately landward of the naturally vegetated wetlands. So due to its close proximity, due to the methodology that's used to install the bulkhead and the anticipated disturbance during construction, there's a very great likelihood that the naturally vegetated wetlands would be damaged. One of the issues that needs to be addressed with applications like this is, as you know, this is an area of the town which is being impacted by rising sea level. And in order for the environment to be resilient in these areas and to prevent the tidal wetlands from being severely inundated and lost, you need to allow for landward migration of those wetlands over time. While the landowner is currently mowing the area immediately landward of the naturally vegetated wetlands, if the mowing practices stop, you would probably see, even in the short term, some migration of wetlands. When you have a wall, a bulkhead, or a retaining wall, there's no ability for those tidal wetlands to migrate landward. So there is a great likelihood with increasing tidal regimes and rise in sea levels that you're going to lose those tidal wetlands over time if you construct the bulkhead. The bulkhead is somewhat unnecessary in that this is an area that doesn't get heavy wave action. Yes, it's an area where significant flooding occurs, but you're unlikely to get any significant direct frontal wave attack. Typically, bulkheads are installed in order to defend a property against that attack. And where there are any concerns about shoreline stabilization along a tributary or creek, you would look for more natural or alternatives. Some of those are referred to as living shoreline methodologies today. Even though the property is unlikely, with the exception of hurricanes, to be subject to a heavy wave attack, you do have a running creek. And what generally happens over time when you construct a bulkhead immediately landward or naturally vegetated wetlands is what you gradually begin to get is some scour of the mussel banks and the sediments that the cord grasses are growing on. And what you see over time is that the roots of the cord grasses and the groundsill and the spartina, they begin to get undercut. You begin to lose the fine silts and sediments, and then you start seeing some gradual collapse of those stands of cord grasses and salt meadow grasses. So with the increasing tidal regimes that we're seeing in many areas throughout the town, and the increasing intensity and ferocity of coastal storms, you should expect that if this bulkhead or retaining wall is constructed, that it will, number one, hinder the needed landward migration of wetlands, but also be a significant factor in the loss of these tidal wetlands over time. The applicant obviously owns a home in a flood zone, and what I had recommended is that rather than try and harden the shoreline, what the applicant should do is evaluate, take some time to evaluate whether or not the house could be elevated. Right now, it appears that the finished first floor of the house is below the flood zone elevation. So the best protection for a home in a case like this is not by bulkheading the shoreline, it's by elevating that structure. In a case like this, generally you would be looking at heightening the existing concrete foundation, installing hydrostatic flood vents to relieve the flood pressure, the water pressure when the area floods. But the goal is to get that finished first floor 2 feet above the flood elevation, which in this case is AE6. So you'd want to get that finished first floor at 8. And that is the best way to protect this residence in the future. Now, the applicant, the landowner had expressed concern regarding the impacts that neighboring bulkheads are having on his property. And that's one of the greatest concerns that we have with new bulkheads and backfilling. When that occurs within a flood zone, it results in displacement of water onto other properties because that water has to go somewhere. So rather than allowing a portion of the natural floodplain on this property to accept those floodwaters, that water gets directed onto other unarmored lots, increasing the risk of flood damage. on other properties. So that's one of the great concerns that we have. So the construction of the bulkhead does not meet the planned construction of the bulkhead does not meet any of the standards for a wetland permit issuance, as there is really no opportunity at this property to provide any substantial mitigation for the significant shoreline modification that would result from this project. So it's even though the applicant is willing to remove some floats and is entertaining creating an area of native landscaping, those measures certainly fall far shy of providing substantial environmental mitigation to offset the adverse impacts of this project. So there's a great need for the applicant to further consider other alternatives for this property. Again, as mentioned at the start of my testimony, there are structures that need to be legalized on this property, and even if they are legalized, their impacts need to be offset by creating naturally vegetated, well-functioning buffers. And if you construct a bulkhead and backfill behind the bulkhead, you lose that ability to create healthy buffers. Again, perhaps more importantly, as mentioned earlier, you prevent landward migration of wetlands. So, as this board knows, the town is all about protecting and restoring wetlands. So the plans that are before you run counter to those goals. So I again would ask the applicant to consider further practicable alternatives. The house on a concrete foundation right now. So while the property of course floods, it's somewhat unclear to me as to whether or not there's crawl space beneath the finished first floor, or whether or not there is any basement use at that property. But a house like this with a concrete foundation, there may be an ability just to heighten that foundation to bring that finished first floor up higher. I don't know if the applicant spoke to the height of the planned bulkhead or retaining wall, how that would compare to the adjacent bulkheads. As you know, the majority of bulkheads that are permitted in this town are permitted by the trustees. And while the trustees have generally been going in the direction of allowing for heightened bulkheads to replace former bulkheads, the heightening on those bulkheads also can cause offsite damage to other properties as a result of severe displacement of floodwaters. So no, I again think that the applicant needs to, as required by the wetland permit issuance standards, continue to evaluate practicable alternatives, because I don't think the demonstration has been made that this is the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative for this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. So,
Mr. Chairman, I know that Mr. Nardi did want to speak. Can we see if he would like to speak at this time?
sure.
Yes, if I may, I'd like to thank, the board, for considering this. I want to thank, Marty for his work on this. I did look into, raising, the property. I probably will end up having to raise the property even with a bulkhead, because, it's not going to eliminate the flooding entirely. Now, the water comes onto the property. It goes, there's a crawl space underneath the first floor. I've had to relocate my father-in-law from the property due to the flooding. It's just, I think that removing half of a 60-foot dock and adding all of the vegetation and the buffer that we're proposing is more of a positive environmental impact on a holistic level than putting a bulkhead. And I think we've demonstrated that the bulkhead there, it does not, impact the wetlands from flourishing and growing, taking out from the creek a 30-foot section of dock and then replanting, over 1,000 square feet of grasses and plantings, and then ceasing the use of fertilizer on the property. I mean, all of these things from a holistic level are more beneficial than the detriment of putting in a bulkhead to mitigate flooding on a property that is, constantly flooded whenever it rains. So that's all I have. I appreciate everybody's consideration and time. And, I have a slight difference of opinion from Mr. Shea, but hopefully we can, move this forward and get a favorable result.
Thanks, Mike.
The law does require the board to seek alternatives, and I'd encourage you to explore that. And one of the alternatives you might consider is moving that proposed bulkhead or retaining wall landward. And I don't want to give any assurance that that's going to mean the board is going to approve it. But the fundamental, one fundamental issue that I see with this application is that you've got a structure in the buffer zone. It's very rare that we approve a structure in the buffer zone. And that structure is what you're proposing to install, that retaining wall. So if you're going to have a retaining wall, I don't think I would entertain a retaining wall anywhere except landward of the buffer. Because as Marty pointed out, the conditions right now are what you folks have presented to us. Marty spoke about conditions that are likely to occur in the future. So what you do by putting a wall between the buffer and the wetlands is demand a static condition on this property, which is completely contrary to the whole tone of chapter 325, where it's dynamic.
Okay,
Well, I'm unfamiliar with the language, and I'm unfamiliar with the size of, where the buffer zone is or is not. I look at the property and the wetlands are defined. And, we obviously want to put a bulkhead. That's why we're applying for this permit. If there are things that we can do that are different from our proposal, I'm happy to entertain them. I entertained already raising the house, and as I said, we're probably going to have to do that eventually anyway. I can work with Chick to see, where we can put other things. If I could not do a bulkhead, and if I could put a row of rocks and other, solutions there, I'd be doing it. But, unfortunately, we're at your mercy because, we have to go to the conservation board for this particular project, no matter what we put there. I just want to cease the flooding on the property because every year it gets worse and worse and worse. And, that's my number one goal. So whatever we need to do to solve that, I'm all for it. I want to preserve the environment. I want to preserve the wetlands. I'm not looking, again, to sterilize like they do down in Florida where there's no nature whatsoever. It's just bulkhead after bulkhead. So, you know, we do have a serious problem over there. And when you go up and down the creek, yes, there's certain houses do not have a bulkhead. They also may be higher up than this particular property from an elevation perspective. But up and down, I think there's about 32 different properties that have a bulkhead out of the, 40 or so that are there. So it's a significant amount of properties that are already bulkheaded, pre-existing, non-conforming, obviously, but they do have that protection that this property lacks. And so I could work with Chick to see if there's other things that we can do in moving the bulkhead proposal and things like that. So, we could take that as a takeaway. So.
Okay.
I just had a couple of remarks at the end if, or anytime, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, we're going to open up to the public for comments, and then we need to adjourn this because we have quite a bit of meeting ahead of us, and we've taken quite a bit of time on this already. So
Understood.
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, a lot of Marty's comments were very consistent with the advisory report, so we were expecting that. I did want to point out that this is a very simple construction wall, and I do expect that it can be done with minimal impact to the vegetation. Landward migration is, it's kind of an interesting thing, but you do have, this cross-section shows the slope of the shoreline, and there's a house that's, not too many feet from the wetland. So, I expect that those areas will change regardless of whether there is a bulkhead placed on the property. And similarly, just in terms of creek dynamics and some of the things that Marty mentioned with respect to increased storm events and sea level rise, those types of things I also expect will occur naturally over time, regardless of whether there's a bulkhead here. We are looking at the current condition, but if you project ahead, I think you can reasonably expect that there's going to be a lot of changes to wetlands on Long Island. It's very disturbing. And there's not a lot of room here for landward migration. So, short of removing the house, it's difficult to conceive how this property, protecting it, is going to have that type of impact. And then some of the comments just about the neighbors, they do have elevated properties, and that's one of the reasons why this one is really the kind of the weak link. So that's one of the reasons that we did propose this. And to answer one question, we were looking to establish the bulkhead at a similar height to the neighboring properties. So that's all I have to say. I think we do have a clear sense of the board's opinion and staff's opinion. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And obviously,
Chick, I'm just looking
if
at
the public
this,
has any comments.
this current plan cross-section, and I'm just realizing now for the first time, you've got elevations listed there. It appears that the mean high water mark is located something like 6 or 8 inches below the house. Am I reading that properly?
Yes, this blue line is that, and I don't have the actual floor elevations on the house on this diagram, but certainly it is very close to where the foundation meets grade. Mean high water is close to where the foundation meets grade, within a half a foot to a little more than half a foot.
From that, it does appear that there is a problem here on this property. It looks like that is demonstrated well, but it also suggests to me that you're going about it the wrong way, because I don't think a bulkhead is going to make much difference in the long term about flooding here. If there really is the kind of storm surge as Michael was alluding to, just from the face of it, it looks to me like anything short of raising the house is doomed to failure. But that's just from what I'm seeing here and, limited exposure. Michael, you've been there a lot longer. But I would suggest we adjourn this and you and Michael or one or the other or both have conversations with Marty. He has a lot of experience in this and has some good ideas. And then come back to us with something else. So first, I would like to just first see, Charlie, is there anybody with their hand up in the public?
I see no hands.
Okay,
If you would like to speak, this is the time to raise your hand. No hands.
okay, then let's adjourn this. What's our schedule look like? Does somebody have a calendar in front of them?
There's December 22nd, January 12th, January 26th. Not sure how.
Chick, when would you like to come back?
Yeah, I'm generally available. It's hard to say at this time how much time we'll need, but you know, a little more than a month at December 22nd, we can certainly calendar for that and give you an update.
Okay, Karina, how many do we have on for that date?
3 right now.
What about the next meeting in January?
January 12th, there's one on right now.
Let's do January 12th. We don't put too much pressure just before Christmas. Does that work?
That works.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mike said it's good. That's good with me.
thank you. Is there someone who'd like to make a motion to adjourn to January 12th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Harry, aye. And who's next on the board here? I usually see, but I gotta, you can remove.
Tom
your
Florio,
screen.
aye.
There we go.
Tom, aye.
Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F,
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
and Tom R. Thank you guys for your presentation. Look forward to seeing you again.
Appreciate it very much. Have a great evening.
And the next application is A021034, Martin Vidjminko and Juliet Jolima.
Chairman, I have to recuse myself, so I'm going to leave and I'll come back when this is done.
Okay.
Good
And
evening,
I
Mr.
expect-
Chairman.
All right, Jim, there should be somebody else in the audience for this application.
I got it. Michael Walsh.
Yes.
Also Suffolk County Environmental. They're both in.
Okay, Bruce? Okay, here's Mike.
Okay, they're both in.
Okay, so Mike, would you like to, or is Bruce going to do this, or Mike, are you?
Well, I'll just start by saying that we submitted another plan when we last before the board on July 14. There was a suggestion, I believe, it was by the chairman to reorient the swimming pool so it was parallel with the deck. We did that. We submitted another survey on September 30. It was presented to, I believe, Mr. Shea. He then came back and said he wants the pool reduced even further. And he wanted most of the backyard sterilized with a buffer. We've been at this since approximately 2016. That's 5 years. When Bruce first applied for the letter of no jurisdiction. We have submitted reams and mountains of proof to your board that there's no wetlands existing at this site. Period. End of story. We've never gotten any rebuttal to that information. Botanical studies, we've got 2 of them in the record. We've shown that the drainage is such that there's a drainage ditch in the back of this property. There's no wetlands. And we've been through this, I think, ad nauseum. This is our plan. We've discussed it with the client, and we're ready to move forward to a determination. We've done everything possible to placate Mr. Shea, but there seems to be no plan that we can put in front of him that is going to make him happy. These people have been tortured by this process, quite frankly, for approximately 5 years. They are at their wits' end. We have 2 lawsuits pending. We'd prefer to go to a court, have a judge look at this fresh, and I think we'd get a fair shake, quite frankly, with the judge. What we see happening here is everything we present to you is rejected by Mr. Shea. The board doesn't seem to be too interested in looking at the materials that we presented. Marty Shea does a botanical study. He comes up with 3 plants. We do a botanical study. We come up with 17 plants, substantially all of which are non-wetlands plants. We show you how we followed the code to the T, to the letter. New York State Methodology Handbook, the Natural Communities Handbook. We went through that ad nauseum. There's absolutely nothing we can do to convince your board, apparently, that Marty Shea is dead wrong. He's wrong in his proof. He's wrong in his facts. And he's absolutely torturing these people for no reason whatsoever. This is not a luxury property. This is a 1-story ranch house. It is a very modest house. These people simply want a swimming pool and a backyard for their 2 young daughters. That's a fact. Bruce Anderson and I are going to push this as hard as we can. At this point, it's a labor of love, quite frankly. And we just want to take the next step. We need a determination. Our application is our application. Bruce is here to answer any questions you may have, but we can no longer be tortured by Marty Shea. This has gone on way too long. We want to go see the judge, period. End of statement. Respectfully, Mr. Chairman.
So I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Do you want to withdraw the application then?
I do not want to withdraw the application. Absolutely not. We want a determination from your board in writing, filed in the town clerk's office, and we'll take it from there. We do not want to withdraw the application. Absolutely not.
You have a survey of the latest proposal?
Yes, we do. We submitted it in writing, UPS overnight and via email to your board. It's in the file. It's been circulated. It's been reviewed by Mr. Shea. He responded to Bruce Anderson, not to me, but he responded to Bruce Anderson, even though I was the one who submitted the document. And he said he wanted the pool reduced even further. He wants, after telling us to reorient the pool and slam it up against the deck, which is really not what the client wants, but we convinced them by twisting their arm to do it. We have a substantial buffer shown on the plan, and that's our plan. We can do no more. We're putting in the new septic system by way of mitigation. We're trying to preserve some of the rear yard for the family, and this is where we are. We've done everything we can do for Mr. Shea. We can do no more.
My screen is not large enough for me to read all the details on that survey. Would you just explain to the board what the green shaded area represents?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Bruce is the technical guy on this one. If you don't mind, if he could come on board and just show you what's on this plan. He prepared it.
Okay.
Good evening.
Bruce?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Matt, let's go to the plant plan. I'm just going to lay out my exhibits because they're all in one file and it's easier. And I ask you to share the screen.
So my question, I don't know if you heard it But my question is,
I'm gonna walk you through the survey.
okay,
Charles,
You may share the screen.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right, we're gonna go to the survey first. And this is a survey prepared by Jeffrey Hatterer. It is dated 9/20/21. It was submitted because during our last hearing of last July, the chairman requested that we explore rotating the pool 90 degrees, which we have done. The pool is sited 97 feet from the rear lot line. And it can, we intend to take 43 feet of the area of the lot between the rear lot line, which is a road, a town unopened road known as Bayview Drive, forward towards the front by 43 feet. This covers the area of dispute in which we assert that there are no wetlands because the nature of the vegetation is such that one can't classify it as wetlands, nor can one delineate its wetland boundaries. And there are mountains of proof to that effect. If we go to the next screen, please. So this is the basic site plan that's depicting the same thing. And what you'll see is a proposed revegetated buffer area. And if we then shift further down, you'll see this is a planting plan. That planting plan consists of numerous wetland plants, such as blue flag iris, soft rush, Joe Pye weed, but it also swamp rose mallow, but it also contains bayberry, wild geranium, and others. So it's a mix, a native mix of planted materials, which the applicant is agreeable to do. If one were to evaluate this plan versus what was out there today, objectively, there would be no question in anyone's mind that this plan is superior to what exists out there today, because what exists out there today is A, uplands, B, is dominated by invasive species, particularly myelominate. And when you consider what's there today, it is almost impossible for the objective reviewer to look at that, A, consider it a wetland, and B, to try to sterilize most of this fellow's backyard because you're not buffering anything. There's nothing to buffer here. So this is what we've offered. It is my opinion that the board should gladly accept this plan, because at the end of the day, the environment is better served by rehabilitating this area rather than preserving it in its present despoiled, overrun with invasive species upland area. And that's why we made the plan. This is what the applicant is willing to do. We are not going to make any changes. This is it. We ask you to approve this. And that's all I have to say. It's offered in settlement of this litigation too. So the idea is if we can agree on this plan, we can all these lawsuits and all this torture can end. We can all go on our own way. And I think that's a better result. I think all sides' interests are preserved and are dealt with if we approve this plan. I think everyone comes out a winner. I do not believe it is necessary, reasonable to take everything from this human being and this nice family. I don't know what the conditions were back when a detached garage was created. I do know a covenant was created and filed without the full consent of all the owners involved. And I do know that these are hardworking young people that didn't get and didn't seek the advice of professionals, because we might have had a much different outcome when that attached garage to this small ranch house was made 10 years ago. But understand this, these people have been tortured for years and years and years, and it's unfair and it's unnecessary.
So this is the plan you would like this board to approve, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and right now, there's a filed covenant that includes some of the property that's not delineated by that green shading.
That is correct.
And would you plant anything in that covenanted area?
Lawn.
Is that a
We
permitted
have
use?
small kids and the kids need a place to play, and a buffer is not required because we do not have a wetland to begin with. And B, the buffer was rushed through by Marty Shea without pursuing the proper steps. He's well aware that he never got the title certification. He was well aware it was never adequately reviewed by him or anyone else, but there was a rush to sterilize the back of this guy's property inappropriately.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask him?
Sure.
Just, can you, with Mike or Bruce, could you explain or give the difference in the size of the buffer as opposed to what your proposal for the covenant area or your planted area is, as far as the width, the distance from the house?
The disputed wetland and its disputed buffer as created in connection with this prior application extends approximately 75 feet from the back of the lot, and the buffer here, or the planted restored area, encompasses an area extending 43 feet from the back of the lot.
So it's 32 feet.
So Bruce, would you pan out on this current screen that you have so that we can see more of the property? I'd like to see the back of the lot to the deck.
Yeah, the original the survey that you submitted probably has that.
Okay, go back. Okay, hold on.
You had it up before.
Yeah.
There it is. There we go.
Okay, and zoom in a little bit more if you would. Okay, so just for the, okay, pan out just a click, one click out. Yeah, that should be good, just like, that's good. So my recollection as I look at other surveys, historical surveys, if you look at there are two, I guess there are two trees. Is that what they are? One on the corner of the pool, the proposed pool. Is that right, Bruce, with a white dot in the middle of it? And one just.
No, that's the sanitary system
Oh,
that
okay,
there's
okay.
two cesspools, and we would replace those cesspools with an IA out system between the house and the road.
Okay, and then there's another circle just outside the pool.
That is also another cesspool.
Okay, so then I'm using that not because it's cesspool, but as an identifier for the space. The survey that I've looked at before shows that the historical buffer zone extends from just seaward of the more seaward sanitary circle to the wetland line. So we're looking at, so to answer your question, Jim, there is a fairly significant amount of space.
Yeah, it's about another 32 feet, basically.
It's currently,
32 to 43 to 75. Yeah.
yeah, that's currently encumbered by a covenant, a
Right.
non-authorization covenant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, Marty, would you speak?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. First, I would offer that the applicant's testimony is a mischaracterization of my intent and my communications with the applicant. As the applicant well knows, I have been working with them to find a way to issue a permit to construct a swimming pool on this property, and looking to resolve what I see as remaining outstanding issues in order to get to that point. With regards to the town's determination that there are regulated wetlands on the property, as this board well knows, the applicant had appealed the town's wetland determination and also sought to get the existing covenant deemed null and void through that appeal application. That appeal application went to hearings. My office submitted a very significant evidence in support of our finding that there's regulated wetlands on the property. The board considered that evidence and denied the appeal and found that, yes, there are regulated wetlands on the property. Yes, the existing covenant is legal and should be adhered to. Notwithstanding that decision on part of the board, the applicant is continuing to indicate in the hearings that there are no wetlands on the property and that the covenant is not valid, which is not helping to resolve the outstanding issues. And this point in time, I would ask Karina if she could screen share the sketch on which we overlay the existing covenanted buffer so the board can see the extent of existing buffer as compared to the protected area that the applicant is proposing. My last emailed communications with the applicant regarding the revised plans occurred in October 12th. And
One second, Marty. Bruce, can you take down the survey so Karina can put up our what Marty's referring to? Thank you.
And contrary to the applicant's testimony, I've got my email on the screen right now. And I started by saying I'm pleased to see that the swimming pool plans have been modified so that the pool would be oriented west-east rather than north-south, as such alternative design has significantly increased the wetland setbacks for the pool. So number one, I came out in support of their reorientation of the pool. I did ask, consistent with the board's policy for other constrained properties where significantly less wetland construction setbacks are sought for a pool construction. I did ask the applicant to give some thought to reducing the pool width from 16 feet to 14 feet. I didn't say that it's required. I wasn't making a decision on part of the board. I just asked that the applicant give consideration to reducing the width of the pool while retaining the pool in its present location. The third point that I made in that email is that that despite the applicant's contention that the existing recorded covenant, which runs with the property and which established the wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer, should be deemed null and void, consistent with the board's denial of the applicant's appeal, the scope of natural vegetation, which was previously deemed as essential to mitigate the adverse impacts related to the previously authorized and since completed garage, needs to be required as an absolute minimum to offset the effects of the planned pool and deck construction. Accordingly, I asked that the applicant revise the survey to show the existing covenanted buffer with an agreement that the applicant would restore that buffer area to natural vegetation. With regards to the applicant's native planting plan, although I expressed concern regarding this wholesale change in the vegetation type within the wetland, I said that I would support the applicant's revegetation plan so long as the reeds were removed by hand and there were no significant grade modifications. I'm concerned about using heavy machinery for the purposes of completing the revegetation, as may change the hydrology of the wetlands and not only affect this property, but abutting properties that contain approximate to these wetlands on the subject line. My recollection is that the applicant did indicate when I had a conversation at the counter that they were amenable to completing the revegetation without significant grade modifications. So essentially what I'm saying is I indicated that I would support the revegetation of the affected areas. Lastly, as I have been requesting since the start of this process, I asked that the survey be revised to continue to show the wetland boundary as defined by the town and to show the full extent of the existing covenanted buffer, and that the applicant amend his revegetation plan in order to restore that area as well. At the last hearing on this application, I had offered that if the applicant wanted to abandon the proposal for active revegetation and simply leave the wetland and buffering areas in their current state while allowing for natural recovery in the disturbed portions of the wetlands and buffer, that I would be fine with that, and that would significantly reduce the cost of this project for the applicant. The applicant has since indicated that they have
they want to go forward with an active revegetation plan, which I have indicated support for as long as the applicant adheres to the existing covenanted buffer. So while I suggested that the applicant give some additional thought to simply reducing the width of the pool from 16 feet to 14 feet. I understand that that's a decision that needs to be made by the board. So that leaves as my only remaining recommendations that the applicant adhere to and comply with the existing covenanted buffer, that be shown on the survey, and that the applicant make the necessary amendments to the revegetation plan to address the remainder of that buffer. I think if the applicant is willing to do that, we can close the hearing and go forward with issuing a permit. Recognize that the applicant is requesting significantly less construction setbacks that are required on this property. But as I have been indicating to the applicant for some time, I will support the construction of the swimming pool on this property and the additional deck, so long as the applicant adheres to that recorded covenant and reestablishes the wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer as described by such covenant. Thank you.
So, Bruce.
And I should just, I'm sorry, I should add that the visual before you is again showing the extent of the covenanted buffer as indicated by those slashes or angles, and that more landward line close to the sanitary cesspool that's being removed. So that responds to the questions and discussion that was had earlier with regards to what is the difference between the area that the applicant is proposing to protect and the area that is required to be protected by the existing filed covenant. Thank you.
And Marty, while you're speaking, would you just clarify, I think I understand the answer to this, but I see white dots forming a varied line right there.
That is the town-defined wetland boundary. And
Okay,
I'm asking that even though that's disputed by the applicant, I'm asking that the applicant continue to show that boundary on the final survey that we would look to approve and reference by the wetlands permit.
Okay, thank you. So
Can I ask a question?
sure.
So it's not about the pool. It's about the covenant wetland.
The pool has been, the orientation has changed to reflect what I had asked, and that looks very good. That's essentially what I suggested the time I met on the property some 5 years or so ago. And I like that. I think that will work. I always thought there was a place in this property to get a pool if that one wanted a place. So yes, you're right, Tom. It appears that the stumbling block is adhering to the already filed covenant for the rest of the property that's not shown on the applicant's survey.
So what are we asking them to do as it relates to that? And what's the response to that? Because we started this whole thing off about the pool.
Well, we've consistently asked them to honor the existing covenant. And that means using the line that we see on the shared drawing right now as the covenanted non-fertilization, non-disturbance zone, as opposed to just the darkened area. It essentially doubles the amount of buffer.
And Michael Walsh, what's the response to that, Russ?
Well, the response to that is we have Martin Shea, your environmental consultant, in sworn testimony since this began and since we commenced our lawsuit, in sworn testimony, which is in your file, stating on the record, A, that there are no wetlands plants in that area. None of the plants that he identified, none of them are wetlands plants, and that's in your record. That's what's driving this. What happened was back in 2008, these people walked into town hall, they went to the counter, and Marty Shea convinced them. They had no representation. They're foreigners. They're Dutch. They didn't really know that Martin Shea did not have the authority to impose a buffer under these circumstances because they were expanding a garage in the front of the property. So that's why we feel that this so-called covenant that everyone's talking about is based on nothing, on absolutely nothing. Bruce Anderson identified 17 plants in the field. Marty Shea, I've identified 3 plants. He didn't even do a botanical study. And the fact of the matter is that what we want to do is we want to get a second shot at this. That's why we came back to your board. And that's why we commenced 2 lawsuits in the Supreme Court to challenge the finding, which we believe is Marty Shea's finding, by the way. I don't believe that the board really ever looked closely at the evidence we put in. Because when we have a list of 17 plants and he has a list of 3 plants in his botanical study, something's very, very wrong. Very wrong. So when we're talking about this so-called wetlands area that Marty's talking about, go out there and take a look. You'll conclude that it's a drainage ditch in the back of the property. It is not a wetlands. It's not connected to anything. It's a low-lying area that fills with water from the adjoining streets and from the adjoining properties. It's obvious to anyone. And if you look at the materials we submitted, we identify 17 plants, no wetlands plants. Martin Shea, he sees 3 plants, and we've got him under oath saying that we're willing to take this back and get a second hearing on it if we have to. What we're looking for here is a backyard so the kids that live there can play in the backyard. If you go down to the property and you take a look, this is a modest property. This is not a luxury property. They're not looking to make a killing here. They're not speculators. They're just a family looking for a swimming pool and a backyard to play in. You're taking away, look at what we're looking at here. We're looking at probably 40 to 45% of the properties being sterilized. There's no backyard. And then you're going to have a swimming pool. You're going to have what, maybe 10 feet, 10 feet for a backyard. It's just punitive. So
I mean, I appreciate that.
Punitive.
I'm clear now that there's still a dispute over whether or not that's a wetland and whether or not the covenant is a legal covenant or not.
Right.
Where the whole thing started. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Can I respond to those comments?
Sure.
This is Marty. That testimony was total mischaracterization of my prior testimony when the applicant had chosen to appeal the wetland determination. There was very significant evidence that was provided to the board showing that the area that's defined as wetlands is predominated by Phragmites or reeds that are underlain by saturated soils and thus meet the definition of wetlands in Chapter 325. One of my staff members took countless photographs on many different dates at the property, showing the flooding that occurs within the reeds in the back of the property.
The board already ruled on that appeal and found that there was regulated wetlands. So it's somewhat unclear to me as to how we can proceed at this time if the applicant is going to say that they want to reappeal that wetland determination. So the board has already ruled on that. As indicated.
Marty, let me just interrupt. Just for
Yeah.
clarification for the board is not going to discuss tonight the validity of that wetland line. That is in stone. That has been done. That's history. Mike, you need to get over it. That's where it is. If you want to challenge that again, this is the wrong forum for that.
We were asked to come back, Mr. Chairman, in lieu of litigating the two lawsuits to the end. We were asked to reapply to your board. Okay, we didn't offer to come back. We were requested to come back. Okay, so I can't get over it, as you say. Okay, and I'm not going to get over it. These people have been mistreated, and if we have to take it to the judge, we will. Not a problem. We just want a
I don't
determination.
think anybody has a problem with that. You've made that
Okay.
clear.
Well, let's we want a determination. I started tonight by telling you that we're here for a determination. If you don't want to approve the plan, that's your prerogative. We've made all the arguments. We put all the evidence before you. And when Marty Shea says there's substantial evidence that there's wetlands there, well, I guess we'll just have to take that to the judge, and we'll have to have them review it. That's fine with us. But we cannot agree to sterilize the entire backyard. It's going too far. It's just going too far. We've done everything that Marty's asked us to do, short of sterilizing the entire backyard.
You
And if you go-
understand that our starting point is that it already is sterilized. We're not asking you to do any more.
We were asked to come back and reapply. That's why we're here. The board can do whatever it wants. Your hands aren't tied just because Marty Shea says they're tied. He's not the board. You can do whatever you want. You have full authority to do whatever you want here, and to reduce that illegal buffer, and give these people some backyard. You have full authority to do that. Your hands aren't tied. There's no law that says you can't amend this permit. Absolutely none.
Well, there's an opportunity here to get a pool tonight.
You know, we don't want the Marty Shea approval that he's just outlined. My clients won't accept it. We don't want it.
Marty Shea, don't think Marty Shea approves it. The board is given the authority to approve it. And that's why
If I may, we have had several meetings with Marty Shea where we walked away with a settlement only to find an hour, a day, or a week later, the settlement has been shuttled by Marty Shea. You have no knowledge of this. When he says he doesn't make a decision on the part of the board, quote unquote, he's been doing that for 5 years. This is your chance to make a decision. That's why we're in front of you, because we could not negotiate with Marty Shea, because Marty Shea refuses to negotiate in good faith.
Let me respond to that. That is a total mischaracterization of my communications during the settlement meetings and my further communications with the applicant. I've made it very
Applicants
clear.
were sitting in the room.
I made it very clear.
They were in the room. We brought the applicants with us.
I think this is all getting really.
Can you interject?
I have to say.
I'm not gonna listen to this abuse.
No, I
Someone has to
understand, but what appears to happen though is.
Town Attorney James Burke, interject.
Yeah,
Not gonna take this abuse.
I understand, Marty, but I think that with all this victimization that's going on, at the end of the day, my understanding is the board did vote, the board, not Marty, to support the covenant, to support this covenant, and you never honored it. So regardless of if Marty did or didn't do, those lines are still there. It was always an issue. what seems to be at stake, and maybe, take it wherever we need to take it. But what we're looking at is something that we voted on that hasn't been responded to. I understand the frustration, and I'm sorry. I mean, I don't think anybody, it's when somebody has a home, they want to make it beautiful for their children. But unfortunately, from what I'm seeing, is the issue is you and your client don't believe there's a wetland here, and the board does. That's what this is about.
Right.
And I
And
guess-
we, just let me say, I want to make it very clear. Once we reach that point that you just described, where there was a vote denying the letter of no jurisdiction request and a vote denying the right to amend the covenanted area. Once we got to that point, we went to court and we commenced litigation in an attempt to overturn that. We were then invited back to make an application. We were invited back by Martin Shea, make an application. I think that the board would support the amendment of the covenanted area because you're going to put in a new IA system, because you're going to do things like reorient the pool, because you're going to do things like revegetate. And so we're not working in a vacuum here. We were invited back to your board to revisit the issue of whether or not the covenant could be amended to give these people a larger backyard. I want to make that very clear. It wasn't like we got bullheaded and we just ignored what you had done and the actions that you had taken. Okay. We were invited to come back to go through this process. The goal on both sides was to reach an agreement as to how large the ultimate buffer should be. And there was a discussion and an understanding that the covenanted area would be amended. That was very clear. I don't want you to think that we just ignored what the board actions the board had taken and we were trying to be disrespectful or bullheaded or anything like that. We were invited to come back and make this application with a view towards amending that covenanted area. And we were told by Mr. Shea, Bruce Anderson has said it, we were told that he believed the board would support the amendment of the covenanted area if we put the IA system in, which we did, and if we reoriented the pool. So, we're being guided, okay, by your board and by the comments of Mr. Shea. Unfortunately, when we come before you at a hearing like this, he seems to go backwards. He seems to not honor the things that he told us during our discussions, which is fine. We understand it. We're adults. We want to move on. If you don't want to approve our plan, we understand. And we need a written determination and we'll take it from there. It's that simple.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Let's try to focus on, let's just like Jim Burke for a minute, just try to focus on the facts and the issues involved and try to keep the personal stuff out. I'm not familiar, I've been in with the negotiations on whether Marty ever yielded on the issue of the size of the buffer. I mean, but I think what's before the board and, are these points that could be discussed, I guess, at this point is the fact that they offered the IA, is that something that should be considered when considering whether the buffer should be reduced? Secondly, I guess the question to me would be, is there anything allowed in the buffered area, the covenanted area, that the family could use, or is the buffered area completely to be sterilized, not to be used in any way, shape, or form, or is it something where, as Mr. Anderson presented today, you have the area they want to have planted, that obviously, because of the plantings and whatnot, cannot really be used for anything else, for child play area. But is there any portion of the buffeted area beyond that area that Bruce talked about? Is that, I know it's non-fertilized areas, but is it areas that could be used by the family, or is it just a completely sterilized situation? And second, I think the board, can review again whether by coming back and offering the IA, is that something that they should consider, the IA system, in considering whether it would be appropriate to reduce the buffer at all? That's okay.
If I could just offer just a couple of comments. And sorry to lose my voice before, but yeah, I did invite, I did recommend that they submit this application to the board because the property contains town regulated wetlands. So in order to get a building permit to construct a pool, they need to first get a wetlands permit. I also offered that notwithstanding the very significant wetland construction relief that they're seeking, that their interest in installing an IA would likely be looked favorably upon by the board. And I think that that could be potentially be beneficial in getting the wetland construction relief that they were seeking. I indicated that Mike and Bruce understand that I have a job to do, and they understand what Chapter 325 directs us to do. So I offered that, of course, when your application comes in, while I will more than likely be generally supportive of constructing a swimming pool on this property, that as my position requires, I would have to provide some discussion as to whether or not there are any alternatives. And some of those alternatives included reorientation of the pool, which the applicant is offering now. Another possible alternative is always reducing the footprint. I had indicated that while typically if a board has already required a certain amount of buffer as mitigation for construction activities that were previously approved, that typically it's their policy to look to expand the buffer. And ideally, I would want the buffer expanded beyond the existing covenanted buffer. But I said because of the offer of installation of an IA, the board was perhaps likely not to require further expansion of the buffer. So I did indicated that I was hoping to work with the applicant to get a permit issued to construct a pool. At that time, they were proposing pond construction and other significant modifications in the wetlands and adjacent area. I expressed some concern about that. They abandoned the idea for the pond. But, you know, I don't, while I certainly indicated that the final decision would be made by the board rather than myself, I don't recall indicating that I would recommend in my advisory report or in my testimony that the existing covenanted buffer be reduced. So again, look, the required setback for construction on this property is 100 feet. The pool is a lot closer than that. Yet I had expressed and continue to express support for construction of a pool on this property. Thank you.
And to further a question you asked, Jim, one of the reasons that we require a buffer and non-disturbance, non-proliferation buffer through submission of a covenant, going back historically, is that we're trying to reduce the nitrogen load on properties.
Sure.
And that's one of the clear ways of doing so.
Right.
So when we have an applicant wanting to plant lawn there, that's a big red flag.
Right.
We don't like lawn.
Mhm.
And it means that we may not be doing our job properly if we relax that for the purpose of planting lawn. And it may work with this landowner, but the future landowners may not. They may fertilize it heavily.
No, I certainly understand the goals and the concept behind it. I just in the it's part of the whole discussion. I understand non-fertilizer, covenanted area, buffered area. just trying to explore if there was anything else that all the parties could live with here. If it's, I appreciate the non-fertilizing, is there something else that could be utilized that could address the concerns and needs of the family but also
When we look-
satisfy Marty and the board's concerns?
When we look at a pool constructed as in this drawing here, this survey, that's a very, historically, that'd be considered a very small buffer for a pool that close to the wetlands that doesn't meet the wetland recommended setbacks. But if we look at the whole area, the hatched area plus the shaded area, then, and that's for mitigating the pool and the garage, that is more in line with what we've done in other applications and more in line with what the law recommends us to do. But just for the benefit of, I guess, everybody, that my comment earlier was not a personal attack on you, Michael. I may have said that too strongly, from at least the interpretation may have been. My point is that we can't review that at this level now, because that was such a significant amount of testimony back when it happened. And the board did look at it very thoroughly and did come up with a conclusion that I believe the board needs to honor unless there's more evidence submitted in contrast to what was submitted earlier. So I think the decision we make must reflect that wetland line that's delineated there is the current wetland line. So a real easy way to close this, end it, build a pool is for the applicant to accept the line that's drawn showing the hatch marks just seaward of the second cesspool ring. So I would ask that question to the applicant, whichever one wants to speak to that.
Would I, Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate that we close the hearing? Based on your comment, and if that is something that my client would agree to, we would just simply amend the survey accordingly. We'd resubmit it. And if we don't do that, board makes whatever decision it chooses at one of the coming hearings. I don't see any other way to do it. I've got to sit down and I've got to explain this to them finally, since we're at this juncture. And if you just want to close the hearing, put it down for a determination. And if they choose to move forward with the project as you described it, with this buffer intact, shown on this survey, the pool where it is, we would just simply amend the survey. I'd submit a cover letter asking the board to issue that permit. And if that doesn't happen, if the board just could issue a determination at some time in the future. I assume denying our application, unfortunately, and that would be the end of it, because we just have to end this. It's becoming extremely it's becoming extremely painful and expensive for the client, quite frankly.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not painting ourselves in a corner here. Generally, we approve an alternative, and the alternative for the pool is fine, and the IA system, that's fine. And maybe we don't need to approve the drawn covenant here because it's already a covenant, and maybe we don't need to take any action on that. So I just need some help legally. If we close this, can we then approve this plan? Or are we denied that option because it came from staff and not from the applicant?
Well, first, I think what Mr. Walsh was stating, that we just close the hearing, and then I think we were going to wait, if I'm correct, Mike, that you were going to contact us and say whether your client is willing to accept it, kind of basically as shown here right now.
Correct.
Right. So we can close the hearing, and then we can wait. We can hold a decision to hear from the applicant whether they accept this proposal as is, and if not, then we can we would create our own decision, and we could discuss that further as how we want to word any other decision.
Okay. Mike, that sounds like a viable plan to me. And so I will ask if there's anyone in the public wants to speak on this application. Of course, any board member that want to speak, you're welcome to also. And then we can close the hearing as you requested. So Charlie, is there anybody with a hand up?
I see no hands.
If we could just get clarification from the applicant as to how long they think that process will take in order to get some guidance from the landowners.
1 week.
Okay, great, thank you. And then you'll advise me by email?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
That should give us plenty of time to make a decision within the required 45 days. Is there, if the board has no more questions, then is there a motion by a board member to close this hearing?
So moved.
Motion to close the hearing.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Yep, second.
All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine.
Aye.
Tom R.
Aye.
Thank you, Bruce and Mike, and the rest of you too.
Thank you for your time this evening. Appreciate it.
All right. 2 hours, 2 hearings. Next, we're going to do these two together as we started earlier. A 021043 Burnett 2012 Family Trust, A 021044 Burnett 2012 Family Trust. These are very similar neighboring properties, and the information on one should go to the other. So we'll do them simultaneously.
Mr. Chairman, we do have affidavits of posting and mailing for both of these applications. They are in compliance with the town code, and the board does have jurisdiction to open the hearing tonight.
Thank you. Is there someone in the audience for these applications?
Mr. Science, and they're in already.
Hello.
Hello, Jim.
I guarantee I won't take 2 hours.
Thank you.
Not even 1 hour. You ready, Harry?
Yes, go ahead. Present your application, please.
Okay. I discussed this with Marty Shea today. I believe Marty Shea went out to the property. The people have, I guess, a collection of fences that weren't approved and moreover may not meet zoning. And I discussed that with Marty. We did not provide a survey of existing fences, which we will do. And the bottom line is, I discussed with Marty Shea, a fence at the wetlands buffer, and Marty indicated that a 6-foot high fence would be acceptable at the wetlands buffer. So what we would do is propose to remove all the fences which don't meet zoning and obtain permits from the building department for any of the fences that exceed 4 feet in height. And then After receiving the wetlands permit, we'll apply for a certificate of wetlands compliance, and Marty Shea or Christian Peterson can go out and check our fences and make sure that they all comply. And then we would apply for a certificate of compliance at the building department. This is a piece of property that I've worked on through 3 different owners. And we have a nice wetlands buffer there. The wetlands buffer was done by James C. Grimes Land Design, and I'm particularly happy about the wetlands buffer plants that were installed. And when I went to the site to post the property, that's what I looked at. I did not really notice fences that were not approved or supposed to be there. So that's something that I should have known about and ordered a survey update to deal with. But Conservation Board can simply issue a permit for a new fence and require that all the fences that don't meet zoning and are not authorized by the wetlands permit be removed. And then that way we can finish this project in short order. And that's all I have for the board. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Marty.
Yeah, just briefly, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. These applications actually taken 2 properties. You're only seeing one of the 2 lots now. The owners of the residents also own the abutting vacant lot to the west. The applicant had originally come forward with a proposal to install alternative fence types as a deterrent to deer. There was some significant concern regarding possible wildlife impacts. So the applicant came back with a second alternative of a different type of fence. There was yet some remaining concerns about possible wildlife injury and harm. So the applicant and I have agreed that the best fencing to go with is as described, a standard vertical 6-foot high fence at 100 feet landward of the wetlands, landward of the existing buffers, with the exception that in the front yard area on the Jewel Pond Drive side, if there are any fences there that are deemed to be in the front yard and exceed 6 feet, that they would be reduced to 4 feet. The building division may actually define the Jewel Pond side as front yard. If that occurs, then there would be no issue with the 6-foot high fences, both on the road side of the house and seaward of the house. So as indicated, the applicant and I have come to agreement as to how to move forward, not only with regards to installation of any new fencing, but with regards to addressing and rectifying any unauthorized fencing. So you can close the hearings tonight. I will then look to meet with the applicant on the property to resolve any remaining outstanding fence issues so that we can issue a wetland permit. Thank you.
Charlie, is anyone with their hand up in the public?
Nope.
Okay, is there a motion to close the hearing for both of these applications?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in
Second.
favor, Harry, I, Tom F,
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
Tom R, And, oh, there's Jerry. He shifted on my screen. Hi, Jerry.
Hi,
Okay.
I'm there.
Okay, missed you there. Okay, those two are closed.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. The next and the last is A 021056 43 Kite Surfer LLC. This is an application that we heard last time and postponed to tonight. Who is here?
Should be Aram Turchinian.
Good evening, members of the board. Aram Tertunian, First Coastal Corporation, West Hampton Beach, New York.
Would you bring us an update?
Yeah, thank you for hearing me tonight. I have a 1 hour and 22-minute presentation I would like to share with everyone.
Two half of it tonight.
The good news is Marty and I met at the site yesterday, and in some cold weather, and gloves from now on is the word. But we had an opportunity to not only visit the subject site, but we walked the entire beach for a couple thousand feet, which I think was instructive for both of us. I won't speak for Marty, but my impression after we concluded our meeting was that there are several tweaks that Marty and I agreed to, and that I have subsequently persuaded my client to accept. And I will explain them to you. And at the conclusion of that, I would request that we close the hearing, and we will resubmit documents that match the verbal understanding that Marty and I gained. So there are three basic elements to our redesign. Number one is that we will change the angle along the shoreline of the structure. If you see right now, it runs parallel to the property line. And when Marty and I visited the site, the shoreline doesn't do that. The shoreline is more landward on the vacant parcel side. And so we have agreed to, oh, thank you. So if you look at that, the structure that we proposed was running parallel to the property line, but the shoreline actually indents a little bit on the left side, which is the kind of the southwest side of the property. And so I proposed a realignment where we pull the structure more landward on the left-hand side of the property. And Marty seemed to be agreeable to that. The other aspect, the second aspect, was the slope of the revetment. Next door, they have literally a vertical stacked wall, not a sloping revetment. And so I agreed that we would change the slope of the revetment from 1 on 1.5 to 1 on 2. And that will give greater wave dissipation and less reflection over the coarse surface that the waves will run. And the third aspect of it was to increase the cobble portion of the material over top of the revetment. One of the things that we noticed was very obvious on the beach, especially here we are in November, was that the beach is a very heavy gravel cobble mix, and that is because that type of material is much more stable under the winter wave conditions. And so what I've agreed on behalf of my client to do is to increase the amount of cobble that goes on top of the revetment, and that is the flexible, movable type of material that will stay resident in the system, but will flex and move when storm waves and tides strike the structure. So those are the three basic elements that we discussed in the field, and my client is satisfied with that. And I'm happy to answer any questions from the board or have Marty correct my recollection.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. When we completed the field assessment, we used the opportunity to talk about possible other site specific approaches or regional approaches to shoreline stabilization, including dredged material placement, creation of a boulder field, installation of breakwaters or oyster reefs, utilizing cobble placement as the sole measure. And then we talked about, as was described by the applicant, refinements to their rock armor plan in the interest of reducing the risk of downdrift impacts to the paper road that serves as beach access for the community. What we found is that while some of the other approaches might be beneficial in addressing the issues with less modification of the shoreline, we found that the narrow width of the beach at present inhibited, as well as the lot size inhibited our ability to try and apply some of these more naturalized shoreline stabilization approaches. The applicant did express an interest in continuing to talk with the homeowners association in the interest of looking at some of these other regional approaches. But, in the interim, until we have a greater shore reclamation plan for the area, the best we can do at this at this point in time is just to go forward with this plan with the refinements as described. So that being said, I'm recommending that the public hearing be closed tonight, and the applicant has agreed to come forward with a refined plan consistent with our site discussion. Thank you.
Charlie, is there anyone in the public that has their hand up?
Nope.
Is there a motion to close?
Motion closed.
Second that.
All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine. Tom R.
Aye.
Advisory reports for the planning board, Hampton Bays Fire District and Good Ground Commons subdivision pre-app.
Yeah, this is a piece of land on the north side of Montauk Highway in Hampton Bays that's owned by the Hampton Bays Fire District. And they have offered to work with the town to subdivide the property in order to allow for an additional access and entrance to the town parklands north of Main Street. So the comments indicate that there is a state constructed water recharge basin adjacent to the track that is regulated as wetlands because the lower part of the basin is continually flooded. However, consistent with Chapter 325, the required buffer for wetlands found related to constructed water recharge basins
is only 25 feet. And if you take that 25-foot distance away from the wetland portion of the recharge basin, it does not even extend into the tract that's being subdivided. Notwithstanding, so what that means is that there is no need for any vegetated buffer on the property that's being subdivided. It does, however, mean that the planning board will need to send section 292-39 B referral to this board. The only other comment made in the advisory report recommendations is that the fire district has indicated that they wish to relocate an existing detached garage. And we've simply asked that that be shown on the subdivision map because its new location is not currently shown, but there are really no significant issues with this subdivision at all.
Is your motion to send these comments to the planning board?
Motion to send the comments to the board?
Been moved, and is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
and Tom R. The administrative wetland permits are in your packets. The preliminary review signature determination A021008 Jimmy Rocco LLC.
So this application relates to a property that was formerly developed with a residence on the Mauritius Bay side of Dune Road in the hamlet of West Hampton. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated November 10, 2021. The applicant is seeking to redevelop this property. I had previously issued an administrative wetlands permit to allow for demolition and removal of the residence and abandonment of the septic system. That work has been completed. There are some remaining structures on the property, accessory improvements, including a storm damaged swimming pool and deck area close to the water that still remain at the site, but would be removed as part of this redevelopment plan. So the new plan for the site calls for building a new residence pool and deck, significantly landward of the pre-existing residence. A new IAOWTS would be installed. A covenanted naturally vegetated buffer would be established, extending generally 75 feet landward of the wetland boundary. It's a little bit narrower in that northeast corner, but with the significant reposition of the house further landward and the extended buffer that's being offered here, I think the plans are fine. So this is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
and Tom R. A021054 199 Georgian Lane LLC.
So this application relates to an existing residentially developed property in the hamlet of Watermill that has frontage on Hayground Cove. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated November 15, 2021.
residents would be considered small to moderate residents for the Watermill area. The new residence that is planned is 3 to 4 times the size of the existing residence. There is a new pool and a terrace that would be constructed. Well, an existing pool and terrace would be removed. There is an existing covenanted buffer on this property, landward of the buffer. There is an existing retaining wall that reaches about 4 feet in height with some interim naturally vegetated area that is not part of the buffer. The applicant has agreed to extend the existing buffer up to that retaining wall that provides separation between the landscaped areas of this landscaped and developed portions of this property from the naturally vegetated shoreline. The new residence, unlike the current dwelling, would be built partially seaward. The limit of moderate wave action as such, the new house is to be built to the standards, which means it needs to be built on elevated pilings. The applicant is proposing an elevated slating grass terrace, pool and hot tub and retaining walls immediately seaward of the residence at conforming setbacks. I have expressed concern about the significant fill deposition, as typically it's the policy of this board not to allow for fill deposition for accessory improvements within flood zones. Typically, we only allow for fill deposition for the purpose of elevation of the septic system. The concern is that the deposition of fill would result in significant modification of the terrain adjacent to the wetlands. It would also interfere with the natural flooding and drainage processes, as would not allow the flood waters to flow under the elevated house and recede on from the house. Rather, they would be redirected towards the flood waters would be redirected towards the abutting properties. The addition of that fill and elevation of the land for the pool and terrace will also increase the amount of storm water runoff, and as well as the risk of contamination from runoff of pesticides and fertilizers. So since this application was initially filed, we have indicated that we have no issue with the redevelopment plans for the site. However, we'd like the applicant to abandon the plans for excessive fill, for accessory improvements, and either replace the elevated terrace with an elevated deck and partially elevated pool, or they could, as an alternative, build a slating grass terrace as is desired at grade. But so the applicant cut back on the fill, but the plan is still calling for significant fill. And although I indicated to the applicant in my advisory report that I would fully support the project plans, so long as they made some further refinements in the amount of fill that would be brought to this site, they've elected to request a public hearing on this application. So you need to act on the resolution setting a date for the hearing. Thank you.
Is there a motion to schedule a public hearing?
Motion to schedule that public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby schedules a public hearing for January 12th, 2022, and that a notice of public hearing be published in the town designated newspaper pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8C of the Town Code. All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
Tom R.
Aye.
A 021082, Wendy Fitzpatrick.
So this application relates to an existing residentially developed property on a private road known as Red Creek Park in the hamlet of Hampton Bays. Property has frontage on Red Creek Pond. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated November 12, 2021. The property is marked by a steep bluff or embankment along the shoreline of the pond. As indicated on the survey before you, the applicant is looking to construct a living area addition on the seaward side of the house within the footprint of an existing deck and at less than the minimum required 100-foot setbacks. They are looking to compensate for the loss of deck by constructing a new deck in the northwest corner of the residence. Notwithstanding that minor seaward addition, the major addition would be on the landward side and would include a two-story garage with a basement, which would be connected to the main residence by an unheated porch. The existing sanitary system would be abandoned. New IAOWTS would be installed. The applicant had proposed a buffer. I had asked that that buffer be expanded. There is a separate sketch that I have provided to the applicant showing the recommended expanded buffer. I've also asked that the applicant preserve the magnificent stand of red cedar trees along the embankment. You're seeing on the survey a wood deck that was built prior to the effective date of Chapter 325 that extends from the level land over a portion of the embankment of bluff. The deck is in good shape, so I'm not asking that any amendments be made to that deck at this time. There's also a set of concrete steps that provide access down to the water that were built many years ago into the face of that embankment. Although we typically require that any walkways be light penetrable surface, the removal of that concrete walkway would likely destabilize the bluff face. So supportive of allowing that existing concrete step walkway as well as that wood deck to remain on the site. Beyond the required naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance non-fertilization buffer, I'm not asking that any other changes be made to the project plans. The applicant is amenable to my mitigation recommendations. As such, we have sufficient information to make a determination on this application. So the hearing requirement can be waived consistent with the resolution before you.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
Tom R.
Aye.
Resolution additional modification A 170597 Lawrence Farkas.
So this is a bulkheaded property on a canal in the hamlet of Remsenburg. Stream is an existing residence close to the canal where previously we had issued, we had acted on a conditional approval to allow for certain accessory improvements on the property, conditioned upon the establishment of a covenanted naturally vegetated wetland, non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer alongside the canal. The applicant revisited their original plans. The property since sold as well. And the changes to the project plans will actually shift many of the accessory improvements further away from the water. The only activity that would occur within very close proximity to the canal is there are existing AC units on the water side of the residence there at grade. The applicant needs to construct an elevated platform for those AC units. Otherwise, those units are vulnerable to flood damage, as that low-lying area along the Dug Canal sometimes gets flooded. So the applicant is not requesting any changes to the previously required covenanted buffer. They have come forward with an excellent plan for native revegetation of the buffer. So the modifications that are being sought to the conditional approval are minor and will not result in any new wetland impacts. As such, recommending that you adopt the resolution to modify the conditional approval to allow the applicant to go forward with these new plans for the site.
Is there a motion?
Motion to
second,
modify.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Lawrence Farkas and Beth Farkas for the proposed project on the terms and conditions as set forth therein. All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry?
aye,
Tom F.
All right.
Sunshine?
Aye.
Tom R.
Aye.
CB 21016, Bus C. Lazarus and Anastasia Lazarus Karoutsas.
So this is an existing residentially developed property on Big Fresh Pond Road in the Hamlet of North Sea. Big Fresh Pond is on the opposite side of the road. However, there are flooded deciduous woods adjacent to this lot. The board had recently issued a permit to allow for certain renovations and improvements to the existing house, including a second floor addition. The applicant is installing an IAOWTS. There is an existing covenanted buffer that was established pursuant to a prior permit that the board had issued, which takes in that land that is most significant in terms of further reclamation of the existing woodlands that come into this property. I had an opportunity to meet with the applicant recently at the property. They want to make some very minor revisions to the plans that were previously approved that are not going to result in any new adverse wetland impacts. As such, I'm recommending that you adopt the resolution to allow us to issue the modified permit so that he can complete the renovations to the residence and hopefully move in December according to this plan.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
second,
Resolve that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Bus C. Lazarus and Anastasia Lazarus Kaloutsas for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry?
aye,
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine? And Tom R.
Aye.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
There's one more. There's one more modification.
Oh,
You need
really?
to- the revised agenda. Modification Laura Bowden and Lucas Torres.
Oh, okay, CB 21025, Laura Bowden and Lucas Torres.
Yeah, this is an existing residentially developed property that fronts on a cove in Hampton Bays that is partially farming. We had recently issued a permit in order to rectify unauthorized deck reconstruction activities conditioned upon replacement of the treated wood with untreated wood. There were some minor bump outs that were authorized and approved as part of that permit. The permit was conditioned upon establishment of a covenanted buffer. The applicant is seeking to make very minor changes to a bathroom bump out on one side of the residence. Those changes not going to have any effects on the wetlands. So I recommend that the board go forward and adopt this resolution so we can issue the modified permit and allow them to complete the construction with these minor refinements.
Just to note, in the resolution, it says that such permit shall be valid until April 28th, 2021. Should that be 2022?
Yes. Yeah, it was recently that we acted on this, yes. So that will be amended. So you would need to vote in favor of the resolution as amended.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Resolved that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Laura Bowden and Lucas Torres for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions as forth herein. All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F.
Aye.
Sunshine,
Aye.
Tom R.
Aye.
Now, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Harry, I. Jerry,
Aye.
Tom F. Sunshine,
Aye.
and Tom R.
Aye.
Thank you all and have a good Turkey Day.
Yes, thank you.
You all too.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kelly.
Kelly, Marty, Charlie, Karina.
Laura, are you still there?
Take care.
Yeah.